Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Today's episode is going to be titled, Most People Don't Hold Themselves to the Same Standards They Set for Others. Something I've come to understand more clearly about people, something I've always kind of known but kept tucked in the back of my mind, is this. Most people don't hold themselves to the same standards they set for others. They preach certain values, talk a big game about principles or discipline, but when it's time to apply those values to their own behavior, suddenly there's wiggle room, exceptions, excuses. For a long time, I didn't want to believe that. I pushed the thought away because it felt too cynical, too harsh. I wanted to think people meant what they said and lived by their own rules. But the more I paid attention, the more I saw the double standards, the contradictions, and it wasn't rare, it was everywhere. Let me give you a clear example. Jordan Peterson, a psychologist who's been all over the internet for years, talks a lot about responsibility, personal order, and especially about cleaning your room before you criticize the world. That idea has been quoted endlessly. It sounds powerful, right? Get your life in order first, then go out and critique society. But not long ago, I saw an interview where his office was shown, and it was a mess. Not just a little cluttered, actually disorganized and chaotic. That moment stuck with me. It was the embodiment of what I'm talking about. Here's a man who made a clean room a metaphor for moral and psychological integrity, and yet didn't seem to follow it himself. Maybe it was just a bad day, maybe he was overwhelmed. But still, it's a crack in the message. If you're going to set a standard, live by it. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart. This kind of hypocrisy isn't limited to public figures. It's in our everyday lives. People constantly set expectations for others that they don't follow themselves. They'll tell you to be honest, but then lie when it suits them. They'll preach calmness but snap at the slightest inconvenience. And when you call them out, suddenly it's different. Why? Because holding yourself accountable is uncomfortable. It's threatening. It forces you to face your own flaws, and most people would rather not do that. It's easier to point fingers at others than it is to look in the mirror. Ego plays a massive role here. People want to believe they're good, strong, right. Admitting they've failed their own standards threatens that self-image. So what do? They deflect, they rationalize, they tell themselves little stories that protect their sense of moral superiority. It's not always malicious, sometimes it's unconscious, but it's weak. It's human, but it's weak, and it's everywhere. That brings us to vulnerability. The reason people struggle to hold themselves to the same standards is because it requires confronting parts of themselves they'd rather ignore. Mistakes, shame, guilt. And not everyone knows how to sit with those feelings without crumbling. It's a kind of emotional immaturity. Cognitive dissonance also plays a huge role. People believe they're good, so when they act in ways that contradict that belief, their brain works overtime to smooth over the conflict. That might mean minimizing what they did or pretending it didn't matter or blaming someone else. Anything to keep that internal narrative intact. Culture doesn't help. If everyone around you is cutting corners, making excuses, or preaching what they don't practice, it becomes the norm. You get a kind of herd morality. Well, everyone else is doing it. And the more common it is, the easier it is to justify. But at the core of all this is an unwillingness to grow. Real growth means being brutally honest with yourself. It means saying, yeah, I messed that up, and doing something about it. That takes courage. It's not glamorous, it doesn't feel good in the moment, but it's the only path to real integrity. I actually talked about this in one of my recent videos when I discussed how a lot of parents are full of it. And I don't say that with disrespect, I say it with experience. Parents love to set standards for their kids, but they don't always follow those same standards. If your parent tells you not to lie, but you constantly catch them lying, what message does that send? It sends the message that rules are for you, not for them, and that's toxic. A parent should model the behavior they expect. Otherwise, the standard becomes a tool of control, not growth. And that's what a lot of this really is, control. People setting standards for others often aren't doing it out of love or integrity. They're doing it to feel in charge, to assert power, to protect their own ego. You have to watch for that. If someone is constantly telling you how to live, what you should be doing, setting standard after standard, but their own behavior doesn't match, don't argue with them. Just observe. Let them talk. Let them show you who they are. Then decide what you want to do with that. Personally, I've learned to just nod and keep moving. I don't waste time trying to hold other people accountable to their own standards. That's not my job. I hold myself accountable. I set standards for me, and I try to live by them. I also try to stay away from people who are always trying to set standards for others. Good people, people with real character, don't need to micromanage others. They lead by example. They don't bark rules, they live them. And if you're paying attention, you can spot the difference. Because here's the thing, standards are personal. They should come from within, not be forced from the outside. If someone wants to wake up at 5:30 every morning, go jogging, eat perfectly, and journal for an hour, great. But if they expect you to do the same, that's where the problem starts. You're not them. You don't have to adopt someone else's blueprint to be a good person. Now, if the standards are simple, don't lie, don't steal, don't hurt people, sure, that's basic decency. But even then, it depends on how it's being said and who is saying it. Context matters, delivery matters, relationship matters. Especially with parents, it's tricky. They don't always care about being fair. Sometimes it's just, do as I say, not as I do. And if you push back, they double down. You won't win that fight. Trust me, I've tried. With my mom, with my dad. It's like arguing with a wall that insists it's right because it's older. So now, I just listen. If they want to talk about their standards, I let them. And then I go do what feels right for me. Because at the end of the day, we all have different standards, different needs, different rhythms. That doesn't make anyone a bad person. It just means we're human. And the people worth keeping around, they understand that. They live their truth quietly and let others do the same. Anyways, thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Signing out. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye for now.